Welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast on CHSN. We're brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. Find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. With Charlie Roumeliotis, I am Pat Boyle. The Hawks split 2 games this week against the Ducks. They lose that one 3-2 on Tuesday night. They follow that up with an impressive win, 3-1 over the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers on Thursday. What's your takeaway from the 3-1 victory over the Panthers?
Yeah, it was a little redemption for Tuesday's game. Going into the third period, Hawks held a 2-1 lead against Anaheim and failed to close the deal in the third period against a team that is in the ballpark of where the Blackhawks are at. So really disappointing loss on Tuesday to a very winnable and against a very winnable team in Anaheim. And then for them to kind of follow it up with being in the same exact position against the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers 2 nights later at the United Center, and for them to close the deal. Was it pretty by any means? Nope. But they got the job done and they found a way to win. And Pat, I don't know what it is about this Blackhawks team, but their wins this season against Edmonton, against Colorado, Minnesota, Florida, they were 64 seconds away from shutting out Winnipeg, which has went on to have the best start in NHL history. For me, I just feel like my theory on why the Hawks play better against upper echelon teams is because their attention to detail has to be so much more heightened when you play a team that can run you out of the building if you're not on your A game versus a team like Anaheim or San Jose. Not saying the Blackhawks do this, but it's easier to psychologically think, okay, we can hang with this team. And, so that's my theory on it. It was a big Blackhawks win. Again, we'll say this, though. It doesn't mean anything, though, if they cannot go to Philly on Saturday and beat them, because they have to start stacking some wins in a row at some point.
I thought Tuesday's effort was one of the most disappointing I have seen from the Blackhawks this season. You're taking an Anaheim team. Granted, they were trying to get back to 500 on the year. They had just won the night before in Dallas. But that being said, they were playing the back end of a back-to-back. You got the early lead in the first period on a Dickinson goal on a nice setup from Connor Bedard. You give it up, the lead, and it's a tie game going to the room after one period with another one of those dreaded late period goals. It was a mistake. TJ Brody tripped up Lucas Reichel. Okay, I'll live with that. That's fine. Okay, things happen. No big deal. But to get the lead in the second period, about 4 minutes in, on another great play by Bedard and Dickinson, and Teravainen did a nice job to keep the play alive, to basically hand the game over to Anaheim and be hemmed into your own end and not be able to just kind of loft the puck out of the zone, make a change, get back and be on your heels for almost the rest of the game. It was really disappointing just to see that you had the opportunity. And I'm with you. They've played the upper echelon teams better this year. There's no question about it. But all the more reason that they certainly aren't performing at the level they need to against the lower echelon teams or the teams that are in their ballpark. So, there's a lot of positives you can take from the win over Florida, but you can also say to yourself, if you can do that on a Thursday night, why can't you show a better effort 2 nights prior against a team that was tired?
For sure. And I think for me, the thing that made Thursday's win against Florida particularly impressive is that they only committed 2 penalties in the game. One of them was a Pat Maroon tripping call, which I didn't think was a tripping call because the skater tried jumping over his skate and tripped over it. And then the second was Wyatt Kaiser flipping one out of the arena for a delay of game penalty. So it was a very disciplined game for the Blackhawks against the defending Stanley Cup champions, where you thought if Florida was skating circles around Chicago, the Hawks could have easily taken 4 or 5 penalties in that game, and they just would have lost the hockey game, because when you give Florida that many opportunities, they're gonna capitalize. But the fact that the Hawks won the special teams battle, they only had 1 power play again for the 4th consecutive game, but they capitalized on their power play and then ended up coming big on their 2 penalty kill opportunities, especially the one in the 3rd period with like 8 minutes left. Was a massive kill for the Blackhawks. So was it a bend but don't break in the 3rd period again? Yeah, but it didn't feel like the shots weren't like 18-3 where you're like, whoa, right, man, they were, one more minute and this game would have gone the other way. It was kind of like a tight checking 3rd period where the Blackhawks eventually did get the empty netter. And so that's where it was a little impressive to me. They played a really disciplined hockey game on Thursday.
Yeah, they absolutely did. It was kind of defense came first collectively as a team, trying to shut down the Barkov line. And because of that, Connor Bedard didn't have a shot attempt for just the 2nd time in his career. And man, when Dickinson left the game in the 2nd period after he blocked a shot with his right hand, we know they're thin at center, but at that point, I think Taylor Hall was centering Bedard's line. Like, they're really kind of running out of options because of their lack of depth at the center position.
Yeah, he's like legitimately their only natural center on the team and the most defensively responsible forward on the Blackhawks team as well, too. So when you saw him leave to go off the ice and you're like, oh, man, it was kind of like a rotation. I think Foligno took a shift up there, but you're like, this is kind of just makeshift for the time being. Then the 3rd period starts. He's back on the ice. He finishes the game. Luke Richardson says afterwards that he's going to need to be evaluated a little bit further. So full disclosure, we're recording this before practice today on Friday because I have to get on a flight to Philly. And so we'll see. I'm not sure if Dickinson is going to practice today. I'm not sure. It's one of those things, like it was probably similar. Hopefully it's not similar to the Seth Jones situation where Seth Jones blocks a shot in the 3rd period against Seattle, ends up finishing the game. And then when the game ends, you realize, oh, swelling goes up, the adrenaline comes down, the pain sets in. So hopefully Jason doesn't miss any games because of this, but it sounded like he really gutted it out in the 3rd period.
Yeah, I would expect Kurashev to be back in the lineup. He was a healthy scratch on Thursday. That will give them another option at center. The big question that everybody seems to be asking and thinking that, AHL is where you go to answer some of these problems that they have with the lack of scoring. Frank Nazar, 15 points in his first 13 games. It's clear that the team would like Frank to stay in Rockford for a little bit longer and, bring him up when they want and not be forced, to bring him up because of injury. Where do you stand on the Frankie Nazar to the Blackhawks talk?
Yeah, I'm still a hard no on this. Keep him in Rockford for quite a few reasons. One, has he been playing well enough where you're like, man, this guy deserves to be in the NHL? Maybe, but there are still some inconsistencies in his game. I know it's easy to look at the points and be wowed by it, but I think he has quite a few games where it's multi-point games, right? So you want to see the consistency shift in, shift out. My biggest reason why they should let him marinate in Rockford for the first half of the season is because he's so used to playing in college where it's 37 to 41-ish games, depending on the length of your playoffs. And so what you don't want to happen is get caught up in Frank Nazar. He looks amazing for the first month of the season. Well, then end of December, January rolls around and he hits a little bit of a wall where psychologically to him, he's like, oh my gosh, my college season would be ending right now. And we're just hitting the halfway point in the professional game. And you're doing so against men, right? So I wouldn't want to call him up because you feel like he's ready through a month. And then with the Blackhawks, you're putting him in a situation where hey, Hawks are struggling to score goals. Come be the savior. And maybe he hits the rookie wall in the NHL, and now he's got to fight through that in the NHL while doing so in the spotlight. Maybe the team is still struggling. So I just think you could do more harm than good by calling him up now. Let him work. I had someone tell me this the other day. Everything has been positive so far. It's been a lot of positive so far with Frank Nazar to this point, right? I kind of want to see him not hit a lull, but I want to see how he reacts to hitting the lull and how he works his way through it in Rockford, because it's not going to be roses, all roses in the NHL. Like, so if he hits maybe a streak in Rockford where maybe he goes 3 or 4 games where he's not producing the way he wants, how does he respond to pushing through that? When he responds and you see the Blackhawks' response to that, then I would be, okay, he worked through some of his lulls, went through a little bit of a tough stretch. He powered through. It's the second half of the season now. I personally, when I would call him up, it would be after the holidays. So after June or January 1st. After that, reassess, because that's basically halfway through the season. And then I would say, okay, how has he handled the first half of the season? How has he handled the adversity? And if he's ready, then I would call him up sometime in the second half after the holidays.
Yeah, I like the thought on seeing how he handles some rough patches in the AHL, because you know what's going to happen in the NHL level. And we've seen it. We've seen it from Lucas Reichel. We've seen it with Connor Bedard. You know, it's not easy when you hit these lulls and you're still very young in your professional career. And the other thing too, like, Frank has all these points because he's playing in all situations. He's on the top power play unit. He's on the first line. He's on the penalty kill. He's in all different situations playing big minutes for Rockford, which he should be doing. If he came to the Blackhawks tomorrow, you know, he wouldn't be playing on the top power play necessarily. He wouldn't be on the first line. So, you know, so he's getting some opportunities in Rockford to show his talents. But when he comes to the NHL, he's not going to be inserted into that exact same spot at the NHL level. So I'm with you on that. Even we've seen from established veterans like Teuvo Teravainen, what this offensive challenge season has done to everybody on this team. And, you know, he came through with the power play goal to start the game against Florida. 4 of his 5 goals have been on the man advantage. But it came after he told Ben Pope a couple days ago that his confidence was at an all-time low. And you've got the quote, not only is his confidence at a low, but he said the rest of the team's was as well.
Yeah, his quote directly says, "I'm chasing the game a lot. My confidence is just getting lower and lower like everybody." And so it was nice to see him break through with an assist against Anaheim on Tuesday. Then he scores a power play goal on Thursday against Florida. So that's back-to-back points for back-to-back games with a point for Teravainen. I think he had like 2 points in his previous 13 or 14 games. So it wasn't just he wasn't scoring. I mean, he wasn't even getting assists. And he had an awesome start to the season with, I think it was 7 points in his first 5 games, 3 goals. So, I mean, it was when you read that quote, it was like, okay, not just is Connor Bedard, we got to get Connor Bedard going if you're the Blackhawks. It's like we got to get all of our top guys going. Teravainen, Taylor Hall, who had been a healthy scratch, Tyler Bertuzzi, all these prized signings and the guys that were supposed to play consistent top 6 roles for the Blackhawks this season have collectively been struggling altogether. It's really been the depth players that have been carrying the load for the Blackhawks. The Ryan Donatos, Craig Smith got on the board again yesterday, so he's among the league or the team lead in goals. So it was nice to see Teravainen get on the score sheet in back-to-back games. Now you hope that the confidence slowly starts to rebuild for Teravainen. Then you hope that it'll do the same for Connor Bedard once he breaks out of his goal slump. And so, yeah, it's listen, the offensive struggles are real. I've honestly been impressed, Pat, by the defensive performance by the Blackhawks this year, to the point where if the Hawks can just find a way to score 3 goals a game, they have a decent chance at winning the hockey game, because there haven't really been many games this season where the Blackhawks have given up 4 or 5 goals.
No, that's been, probably the strongest part, and it probably starts in net. Both Mrazek and Soderblom have been fantastic in net for most of the 20 games. You've got that stat, saves above expected, right?
Yep. Hawks are among the league leaders.
And then there's like quality starts too. I've seen that stat as well. Mrazek is among the league leaders in quality starts. So, you're starting in net with your goalie always giving you a chance to win the game. Defensively, you're not giving up a ton. If they could get, more production from the power play, and by that I mean get power plays, to go 4 straight games with 1 power play. Now they cashed in against Florida. That's great, but it does kind of signal, Luke used to say last year, we want to be hard to play against. I don't think they've been hard enough to play against this year. You chronicled the good teams, but of the 20 games they've played so far, I don't think by and large the majority of those games they've been tough to play against. And that was something that, with the upgrade in talent, we thought we were going to see that on a more regular basis. That would be, and that to me, when you're hard to play against and you're winning battles, that's when you draw penalties.
For sure. And I have no problem with the officiating over the last 4 games, because it's not like the Blackhawks, it's not like the officials are missing calls. It's just that the Hawks have not been the aggressors to force the officials or the opponents to take penalties against the Blackhawks. And so, it was 26 seconds of power play time against Seattle, and then 1 power play in each of the last, just 2 minutes of power play time in each of the last 3 games. So you'd like to see an uptick in that department, because it's not all going to be like Thursday's game where you get 1 power play, then you cash in. You need several opportunities. You need to try to get into the 3 or 4 power play per game range, lessen the load from the defensive guys, but also you're trying to get Teravainen and Bedard and Bertuzzi and all these guys' confidence higher, and that's where they get their cookies. That's where they get their confidence, when they're producing on that power play. Maybe not getting goals and assists, but at least just generating some sort of momentum. Like if you have a power play where the Hawks are generating like 3 or 4 scoring chances on it, maybe it can trickle into the 5-on-5 game, and then Bedard and Teravainen, they start to get a little bit, they find their legs a little bit because they get some jump from that. So that's another reason. It's just kind of like multi-layered situation. You want to see the Blackhawks try to be a little bit more aggressive in drawing those power plays.
Hey, coming up, we've got an interview with Steve Larmer. We'll have that for you in just a second. But first, we heard from Jonathan Toews this week via social media, and it's good to hear from him, because he has been pretty quiet. I know he was back in Chicago a bit over the summer. He's been traveling quite a bit, but in an Instagram post, he shed some light on what he's been going through. And he spent 5 weeks in India undergoing a detox program called Panchakarma. Hope I'm saying that correctly. And things are trending in the right direction from him. He's been dealing with the inflammatory and immune system issues for the better part of 5 years now, Charlie. And, he feels like this time that he spent in India he learned a lot. His body learned a lot. He's going through some healing. He's changing things with his diet. He's always been at the forefront of what he's putting in his body, but even through this Panchakarma, the protocol is even more in line with what you're putting in your body. Is it suited for your body? And your thoughts on the fact that we heard from the captain and we hadn't heard from him in a long, long time.
Yeah, it was nice to kind of see, and fans were able to kind of get an update on where he's at, because I know a lot of fans are wondering, like, where's Taves? What's he up to? He obviously missed that one season, the one COVID season, because of the chronic immune response syndrome and the long COVID. And then it was parts of the final season with the Blackhawks that he was in and out of the lineup, just dealing with the body, right? And I know he hasn't officially filed his retirement papers yet, because he's still kind of like left the door open. I would be surprised if he returned at this point. For me, it was just nice to see him getting some answers on some of the things that have been ailing him for the last several years. And so for him, I think if you're a Blackhawks fan, the life takes priority first. You hope that he's in a good headspace, finding some answers, and you hope that kind of carries into the quality of life, and not necessarily, oh, could he return to, to make one more run or to make some sort of comeback. But yeah, it was nice. It was nice that Johnny, who typically keeps a low profile, it was nice for him to shed an update on what he's been going through and some of the answers he's been finding to fans.
Hell, it'd just be nice to see him at the United Center, right? Just, pop in for a game every once in a while. It'd be great to see him in the building that he brought us so many amazing memories. So all the best to Taves, and hopefully this journey continues to shed some light and some answers to what he's been dealing with. Talk about people coming back to the United Center. Steve Larmer was at the game on Thursday. I saw you tweeted about that. I had a chance to talk to him before the game against the Florida Panthers. We talked about his fondest memories with the Blackhawks. And of course, when you talk to Steve Larmer, you have to talk about the Hall of Fame. Here's that conversation.
Look who's here. Good number 28 is back in Chicago. Steve Larmer. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
It's always great to have you back in Chicago. Let's talk a little bit about some of your former teammates. Let's start with Jeremy Roenick, recently enshrined in the Hall of Fame. What was JR like as a teammate, and both on and off the ice?
Oh, he was a great teammate, both on and off the ice. I think he came here at a time where when he was young, and I was getting a little older, so it was nice to have some youthful energy around, and he was a great player. It was a lot of fun playing with him, and him and Michel Goulet was our left winger, so we had a lot of fun playing together, and we had a lot of fun off the ice too.
Did you watch his enshrinement in Toronto and see his speech?
Yes, I was actually there at the ceremony, and it was a great speech. He did a great job, and was very well deserving for him.
Speaking of the Hall of Fame, there's been some new changes to the selection committee. With those new changes, are you encouraged about your candidacy kind of going forward? Some new voices and new folks that are going to be talking about possible candidates?
And it's not really something that I think about a lot of anymore. I mean, it's been a long time, and if it happens, great. And if it doesn't happen, it's not like it's going to change anything. So I'm at a good point in my life right now, and satisfied and very happy.
You had 13 wonderful years here in Chicago. I know I've talked to you over the years when you're in for Chelly's thing and others. Do you have a couple of fondest memories that stick out above the others?
Well, one of them is you come in here a young man and you leave a little bit wiser and older, and it takes a village to raise an idiot, and I think I turned out to be a pretty good idiot. So, growing up here was a lot of fun, and being mentored by the many great players that I've played with, and the friends that I've made here is something I'll never forget. And I mean, I think my fondest memory of playing the old Chicago Stadium was probably the All-Star game. I think it was in 1991 when Desert Storm had gone on, and when they played the national anthem that night, it was probably the loudest I've ever heard that building.
Everybody that was there, and those that watched it on TV, just talk about the hair standing on the back of their neck. When you talk about becoming wiser, what Blackhawk took you under his wing, or who gave you the best advice when you were in the early part of your career here in Chicago?
Well, I think we had, I had a lot of influences on me playing here. I was able to play with Tony Esposito for my first 2 years, who was like a childhood idol of mine. And he took me under his wing and really helped me a lot. Dougie Wilson and Bobby Murray were two guys that I played with for a long time here that took me under their wing and taught me how to be a professional hockey player and how to be a good person. And having the ability to play with Dennis Savard and Al Secord and Rich Preston and Billy Gardner and Ricky Patterson and, Stevie Ludzik. They all have an influence on you and how you play the game and how you grow up, to turn into a man.
You talk about Savard and Secord, the party line. You look at the numbers that you guys put up. It was phenomenal. Was that chemistry? Did it take long for it to come together, or was it pretty much instant?
I think it, pretty much it was instant. I think, my first year when I played here, I was able to play with Dennis and Al, and, they helped me a great deal, and our line, clicked right away, and we seemed to have, a lot of toughness with Al, and he created a lot of space for Dennis and myself, and I think Al scored a couple of, 50-goal years, and Dennis was a great distributor of the puck, and I did what I could to chip in when I could and help out. So it was a lot of fun playing with those guys for sure.
I would say 40-plus goals in 5 seasons. Yeah, you found the back of the net quite often. You won the Rookie of the Year back in 1983. That Calder Trophy brings a lot of prestige and expectations. So you knew what it was like that sophomore year and the third year in the league and what it's like kind of now that everyone knows that's the Calder Trophy winner that came in. Connor Bedard went through that last year, and now he's in his sophomore season. What advice would you give to him about, the expectations and trying to fulfill those?
Well, I think, the easiest year you're ever going to have is your first year because nobody really knows you and the expectations aren't high, things like that. And it only ever gets harder. And I think with most players, and even I think my second year, there was a drop-off in production. And I think that's a natural thing to happen that happens with every second-year player, especially when the bar's set high and you've had such a great first year. So I think it's actually natural. It's going to happen. And the thing is, he's still a teenager. Just go out and enjoy it. Have fun playing hockey. It's at the end of the day, it's still a game.
Yeah, Wayne Gretzky talked about some struggles he had early on in his career, and John Muckler said, hey, don't go out there tonight trying to give me a hat trick or give me 5 points. Just make one special play. And I think, when we look at Connor right now, mired in his, longest goal drought of his young career, maybe he's trying to get it all back at once. What you went through those types of...
Well, absolutely. I mean, the only thing is just it's hard, from a mental standpoint, I think it's hard. I mean, he's got all the physical attributes you could want in a professional athlete and a hockey player. So it's mentally, it's just, you got to forget about it. Today's a new day. The sun comes up. You put your work boots on and you go out and you have fun and just do what you can and try to simplify your game. Don't complicate it. Make easy plays, make simple plays, and put pucks at the net. Let the goalie make the mistake.
Blackhawks fans and hockey fans in general appreciate what you accomplished in your career. I've been lucky enough to be in this town in a broadcasting role for 20 years. There is this Steve Larmer subset that absolutely worship you. And it's not that you are not appreciated enough or not recognized enough. They just want everybody to know how great you are. Do you feel that love when you come to town? They're vocal as hell, and it's impressive to see after so many years how they keep beating the drum, and they're just really, really enjoyed what you brought and want to make sure everybody knows about it.
Well, thank you. That's nice to know. I feel very comfortable when I come back to Chicago and appreciated very much, by all kinds of fans and whatnot. But I think it's always been it was really interesting playing here, I think, in the Midwest and that attitude that people here have. It's, the harder you work, the harder you can play. And they really appreciate, I think, people that work hard at their jobs, or whether it's football or hockey or in any athlete in this city. The harder you work, the more they appreciate it. And I think I'd like to think that I, 12 years that I played here, put in the work and tried to be the best that I could be.
Well, it's great to see you back here in Chicago. Don't be a stranger. And, the love from the Larmer faithful is a real thing.
Well, thank you so much.
Charlie, with some of the changes that have been made to that Hall of Fame committee in Toronto, some new voices, some different folks, I think that may bode well for Steve, and we could see him, rightfully so, get his spot in Toronto in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and it's been weird because it feels like we've been trending towards more Blackhawks getting in after being overlooked. Doug Wilson, Jeremy Roenick the last couple of years getting in after lengthy waits. And so it's been, hopefully Steve Larmer gets his time, because, listen, I wasn't around to watch him, but my dad swears by him, how great of a player he was. And the one thing, too, is I always – when we talked to Dennis Savard about it, he's like, I'm not a Hall of Famer if I didn't have play with Steve Larmer, right? And so, you take that as gospel. And so it was nice to see him in the building, sounding the horn. You'd think he did a Q&A before the game with Pat Foley hosting, and then he swung by the WGN radio booth as well in the second intermission and was able to catch up with Troy Murray. So it was nice. It was nice to see him in the building. I know he doesn't live here anymore, so him coming into town and just kind of getting that recognition by the fan base. And hopefully he does get his time and his call in the Hall.
All right. The Blackhawks are off to Philadelphia. You'll be a part of that trip. Look forward to hearing you on the radio on Saturday, and we'll reconvene next week for a podcast. And hopefully the Hawks can start stacking wins here. And we're not talking about the ups, the downs, but we'll see what happens. That's going to do it for the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast, brought to you by Toyota. Let's go places. For Charlie Roumeliotis, I'm Pat Boyle. Thanks for watching and listening, and we will catch you next time.